Hello everybody, this is Justin Nasimbo Mayanja, and today I want to share with you the concept of inflation. Almost every country around the world has experienced inflation. It's only that some countries have low rates of inflation and others have high rates of inflation. And it's only that the effects of inflation have treated each country differently. By definition, inflation is a persistent increase in the general price levels of goods and services in a given period of time. So inflationary tendencies are everywhere. There's a persistent increase in the general price levels of goods and services all over the world. But there are two kinds or types of inflation that we may actually concentrate on. That inflation can be mild. That means that the persistent increase in the general prices of goods and services is below 10%. Inflation on the other side can be hyper. That implies that the persistent increase in the general price levels of goods and services is above 10%. Now, it's worth noting that whenever inflation is mild, it has some advantages. It encourages savings, forced savings, of course. It encourages investment. There's increased utilization of resources. Government definitely gets more revenue because of the increased investment in the economy. However, when inflation is hyper, or when the rate of inflation is above 10%, nations suffer adverse effects or negative effects, such as unemployment, such as fall of some of the industries. They can collapse because they get less profit. It discourages investment because of the increased cost of production. And of course, it makes the currency lose value, and therefore the government in power becomes unpopular as a result of inflation. But this inflation, which comes up in every economy, sometimes comes from somewhere. It can be a cost push inflation. It means that a rise in prices is arising from an increase in the cost of production, either an increase in the prices of fuel, or an increase in the cost of raw materials, or an increase in the wages paid to labor, or increase in the taxes that government has levied on these people who are carrying out production. And because of that increased cost of production, they also choose to increase the prices of the output that they sell. But it's also worth noting that sometimes the inflation can arise as a result of the demand side, and that is the demand pull inflation. This can arise in case there is increased government expenditure. Government is putting a lot of money into the public. It can arise if there are increased remittances, if people are getting a lot of money from abroad, so the too much money can be chasing too few goods. But it can also arise as a result of increased credit creation. Sometimes banks are giving too much money, and if that too much money is chasing too few goods, the increased money supply, which is not accompanied by an increase in production of goods and services, usually leads to inflationary tendencies. Now, everybody in government, everybody in power ought to know that because of the adverse effects of inflation, inflation needs to be controlled because it leads to family instabilities, especially when labor loses work, and therefore breadwinners cannot sustain their families. It leads to income inequality. It leads to unemployment tendencies. It leads to loss in the value of a country's currency. When people trade, they benefit less in case their countries experience inflation. The effects of inflation can be so many, but inflation can be controlled by different economies differently. One, government can choose to subsidize producers of certain key commodities so as to have increased supply, and therefore prices can fall. Now, these key areas that drive production, like fuel, government ought to be sensitive when taxing such areas, because such areas increase the cost of production of many other different goods. And in the long run, inflation arises. Government should be key on maintaining political stability, just as they should be key on maintaining price stability, because the price stability encourages investment, just like the political stability attracts more people to come into a country to invest in the production of goods and services. Those engaged in agriculture should modernize it so that we have increased supply throughout the year, and in that way, a stable supply can be able to stabilize prices. There is more to share about inflation, but that is all I could share for today. Wish you God's blessings. God bless you. Have a blessed month.